This week, solutions to your downward dog dilemmas and other yoga poses you're doing wrong.
Welcome back, everybody. So what if you could change your life in an instant? Our next guest says that you can solve your problems in a flash with an epiphany.
In his new book, The Holy S Moment, author James Fell uses scientific research to explain how to make an epiphany happen and transform your life for the better. He joins us now with tips and tricks. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much.
So, James, since we're doing daytime TV here, we're going to refer to your book as The Holy S Moment.
Okay.
In your research, you discovered that only 1/3 of us has ever really even experienced an epiphany in our lives. So tell us, for those who don't know what one is an epiphany?
So it's that sudden lightning strike of awareness, the answer to a problem that's been plaguing you, or finding purpose in life, where it's delivered suddenly from the unconscious as, oh, wow, this is it. This
like
is
that
what
aha moment.
The aha moment.
aha
That's a
moment.
clean version of referring to it. And one of the great things about it is that there's this neurochemical cascade that comes along with it, where it's this deeply emotional experience. You know that this is something important that's happened, and it has the power to motivate you and drive you forward through toil and adversity for months and years to achieve this goal.
And you know what you speak because you say that you've experienced more than one epiphany in your lifetime. Tell us more about that.
Well, I had the first big one was when I was in my early 20s, when flunking out of school, drinking too much, in debt, and I read a quote that was, "Action is the antidote to despair." And I realized that this was a hole of my own digging. And I went from being just very lazy and doing the bare minimum to suddenly realizing that if I worked really hard, I could climb out of this hole and see the light at the end of the tunnel. And part of it had to do with this girl that I really liked and wanted to impress. And we've been together almost 30 years now, so I guess it worked out.
A lot of us feel like an epiphany is kind of like inspiration, that it has to happen just naturally or spontaneously. But you say there's evidence that these can be manufactured, that we can set the stage for an epiphany to happen. How do we do that?
Well, if you think of motivation like a mountain, where you're at the base of the mountain of no motivation to do any of the work at all, and the top is peak motivation to do all the work with inspired vigor, sometimes it just appears out of nowhere and lifts you right up at the top. But other times you can sort of be the tortoise of slow and steady, but thinking like a hare, because what you're doing is you're taking in all sorts of information and experience, and you're opening yourself up to the possibility of this is something that could happen, where suddenly I'm going to realize, based on this new information, something important about myself. You engage in self-reflection. Who am I? Where am I going? Where have I been? What's my situation like? What's important to me? But you also need to engage in distraction, where you get comfortable with your own thoughts and not always looking at your phone, but engaging in meditation or a walk in nature where you left your phone at home. And that's when it arrives. It can even come from prayer.
Let's go back to the tortoise and the hare, because conventionally we've been told that change doesn't happen overnight. And we see that in science too, right? Like evolution takes a while. But where our lives are concerned, and when we make plans, you're saying that long-term plans sometimes aren't that helpful.
That's true, because they're built around a model of behavior change. And the key word there is behavior, where you're focusing on changing things that you don't necessarily want to change. It's the suffering model of enduring through willpower and grit. And that's why they say baby steps, because you're trying to minimize that suffering. With the sudden awakening of the life-changing epiphany, it's not about behavior change. It's about a change in your core identity of who you are, where you suddenly realize something very important about yourself and something that you feel that you must do. And along with that comes a change in your values, in terms of this is what is really important to me. That has a cascading ripple effect through your attitudes and your beliefs and your behaviors, where everything just sort of syncs up effortlessly. One of the things of the people that I've interviewed for the book say that I didn't have to struggle with my motivation. It just came built in, because you became this new person that just does these things. It's not about habit formation. It's about fulfilling a life's purpose.
But with some of that, and maybe with epiphanies, can also come the idea that you need to embrace a certain amount of risk, especially if it's a fundamental shift in the direction of your life. I feel like I had an epiphany in my mid-20s. I left an entire career, put all that education aside, and completely went to a different career and kind of had to start from the beginning. That's risky. That's risky. If you've got a mortgage, it's risky. And I had one, you know, those kinds of things. And yet we are, as parents, the generation of having risk-averse parenting styles, helicopter parenting, bubble wrapping our kids. Don't go to the playground. That could be dangerous. So how do we start to raise our kids to have a bit more, allow them the risk to take chances, to have these big moments eventually in their lives?
Well, part of it you've already answered because of the modeling that you did, that you showed that it was something that you were willing to do. I did it myself with having a successful business career and then deciding, no, I want to be a writer, which is, you know, not necessarily the way to riches. But I think that when it comes to our children, we need to be willing to let them fail and then be there to pick them up afterward. A lot of people seem to think that, you know, you need to stay in this certain lane and that you need to follow the societal construct of what they say you can and cannot do. And there's a famous quote that says, a lot of people want to tiptoe through life, making it safely to death. I like the idea of, you know, there are audacious goals that you could achieve. There is adventure to be had. And there are smart ways to go about it. But consider endless possibility of things that you could do with your life, and you may discover this overwhelming passion to fulfill that dream.
Well, speaking of dreams, there's a chapter in your book where you address dreams and daydreaming. I'm a big daydreamer. I mean, I have fantasies, and I like to replay them over and over again. They make me feel so good. But you're saying that sometimes daydreams can be a detriment?
Yes.
Am I going to stop having my daydreams? Like, what's going on?
I mean, for me, the example, my personal story of this positive fantasy not necessarily being good for goal attainment is that in my fantasies, when I hear that righteous, you know, Rush guitar solo, in my mind, it's me playing, where I think, yeah, I'm the world's greatest guitar player. And because of that, it feels like I've already accomplished it in my mind because of that fantasy. And that takes away the good stress that it takes to drive you toward achieving that goal. Instead, the type of thing, it's okay to do that just a little bit, but you should spend more time focusing on the fantasization of being able to do the work and go past the obstacles to actually see yourself, visualize yourself accomplishing that goal where, you know, you're working with your guitar instructor and you're doing the scales and you're seeing yourself practice day after day and taking the joy in working toward that sort of cliched, it's about the journey, not the destination, and actually focusing on your empowering yourself to walk that path, take that journey.
Well, holy S, James, that was great having you on the show. The book is called The Holy S Moment. Good news for our studio audience. You are all going home with your very own copy. We'll be right back.